You're listening in on an animated discussion about Batman the Animated Series with two experts in their fields. I'm Joshua Unruh, superhero scholar.
And I'm Caleb Masters, your friendly neighborhood film critic extraordinaire from the cinematropolis.com. And today's topic is the 29th DC original animated movie, Batman and Harley Quinn. But hold on, we know this is not actually part of Batman the Animated Series, or is it? We're going to talk about that in 1 second. Joshua, maybe key the listeners in on exactly why we're talking about this instead of the next episode of Batman the Animated Series.
Well, as some of you may have noticed, Batman the Animated Series dropped off of the Amazon Prime option. You can still rent it and buy it through Amazon, but you can no longer watch it as part of Prime. And what you may not be aware of is that this is due to DC spinning up their own proprietary streaming service,
which is cool. I mean, like it is what it is. But you know what would have been nice for our purposes if that went straight from Amazon to that thing and that thing was available that day. Because I'm going to subscribe to it. But I was like, oh wait, yes. Joshua, we're out of episodes, but we can't actually easily access BTAS right now for about 2 weeks.
And it's the same for you, our listeners that were watching along with us. If you don't own ancient DVD sets like myself, or if your brand new Blu-ray re-release hasn't arrived yet.
Yes, because I have it pre-ordered for October 30th. It's coming.
You have no options. So instead, we decided to veer course a little bit, do something that we felt was connected to the animated series universe and continuity, and also involved at least a couple of the creators from that show. And most importantly, you can watch on Amazon Prime.
Right now. Now, I think the next question you're going to be asking, like, oh, cool, Batman and Harley, should I watch it on Amazon? Well, we're here to talk about that today. And the answer is no.
Don't watch it.
Don't watch it.
I mean, if we get your interest here today, go watch it, I guess. But be aware, you are in for a less than stellar experience.
Yes. And we're going to talk about it a little bit. I know Joshua and I, we've entertained the idea of talking about these straight-to-home video movies before, and it's something I think, in the future we'll probably do again at some point. At least I hope so. It gives me an excuse to keep up with the Joneses with these things, because for a long time, I think Joshua and I both have kind of fallen off the wagon on these. The only reason I watched this initially, this is the second time I watched Batman and Harley in preparation for the show, and it was only because Joshua, we were just talking about it. He's like, oh yeah, I think that's on Amazon like a month ago. And I was like, cool. Watched it and I was like, ooh, yeah. And
now the thing that you knew that I did not know,
yes.
like I have fallen way off of the wagon with the DC animated stuff. And I did not realize that Bruce Timm was even involved in this one.
That's a great point. So yes, Bruce Timm, the famous creator of Batman the Animated Series, one of the creators, wrote this one, and he did not direct it. He produced it. And he got the story. He has the story, which is not the same thing as writing it. And then he also wrote the script for it.
Co-wrote it with someone else at least.
Yes, he co-wrote with someone else.
Very deeply involved in the creation of this thing. Like I'm almost a little surprised he didn't just go ahead and direct it also.
Yeah, it's really weird. Well, he leaned on Sam Liu, who has been one of their go-to guys for these straight-to-home video movies, and he's done a pretty good job on a lot of them. At least he understands the action. He has a good grasp for the characters. So it's why not lean on that guy, I guess. But yeah, so Bruce Timm creating it. So you're thinking, oh, Bruce Timm, he is the guy who created the thing.
Clearly quality.
And this is the first time he has actually written, specifically has had a writing credit since Justice League Unlimited in 2006. So he's he's been around as a producer the whole time. He has story credits on several of these, but this is the first time he has written something in
since
12 years.
2006. That's a long time. Yeah.
I guess when this came out last year, so it would have been in 11 years.
Yeah.
So my thought is like, wow, 11 years and he's coming out of retirement. He must have a really cool story he wants to tell. Right?
That's a theory. I don't think it's borne out.
Well, we're here to tell you
it doesn't work.
It doesn't work out.
So there is a lot to dislike in this movie. We are going to start with the handful of things that we thought were done pretty well.
Yes. As a film critic, I always want to go into every movie. And Joshua, I'm sure as a comic book scholar yourself also, like you're like, hey, I don't just read something because I want to hate read it. You go in hoping it's going to be kind of good, right? You don't want things to be trash. So I always start with the positive. What do you think, Joshua? What are a couple things you really like about this movie?
I think one thing we definitely agree on is the fight choreography in this movie is great.
Yes, excellent.
I mean, we have recently discussed Day of the Samurai, which was ostensibly a martial arts adventure, but the animation at the time just wasn't quite up to that challenge. And then separate from you, I had the occasion to rewatch a couple of Justice League episodes that involved Black Canary, and therefore a lot of really great fight choreography. And so going into this one, I was blown away. We're talking about that Justice League Unlimited level of fight choreography. It looks good.
It looks really good.
Real fluid. The action tells a story, which is always a thing that I'm looking for. Like, we're not just trading punches. We are finding something out about our characters in the process, and there's some ebb and flow, and this person gets the upper hand, and that person gets the upper hand. A++ fight choreography.
Yeah, fight choreography, which actually leads to me to the thing I like about it, which is we should also mention that this is done in the style of Justice League Unlimited. This goes in the style of the Batman, the animated series redesign, or the New Adventures of Batman and Robin. So it looks just like that, except for it has the benefit of being in widescreen, for example.
Yes.
It has higher resolution, and because it has a bigger budget, they're able to do more with the animation. So it has that going for it. I think it has a great look. It feels like if they just put a new episode of the New Adventures of Batman animated series out today with that redesign and an extra like oomph in the budget. It looks great. The fight choreography is great. All of the visual stuff I think works for me by and large.
Yeah, I agree. The visual is good. Even characters that we've never seen created before on those shows look really good here. Jason Woodrue, for instance. Like that's not the only look for Jason Woodrue that they could pull from the comics, but it's a real good one for this take.
And they make it part of the story, too.
Absolutely.
Like the way he's made out of leaves and everything. Yeah, really, really cool. Leads me to another thing that I think I forgot to ask you about earlier, but Kevin Conroy is Batman.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the voice cast.
The voice casting is good.
It's good. They have, well, actually...
Oh, no. There's a giant asterisk there.
There's a huge...
We're talking about the good things.
Yeah, the good things. Kevin Conroy is back as Batman, and then Lauren Lester is back as Nightwing.
Yes.
Or Dick Grayson. So
Dick Grayson, Nightwing, who was Robin in the episodes you've been watching with us for the regular animated discussion.
And they're great. The chemistry feels like it's right there. And it just feels like this is where we'll get to the things we don't like in a second, but like parts of this feel like it's ripped straight from that series. Like the chemistry's there, the way they carry their posture and they talk, it's all there.
And we have a new addition to the voice cast. We have a couple, but again, I'm staying positive. In Paget Brewster is Poison Ivy.
Yeah.
And I love Paget Brewster.
She is good.
She is so good in this kind of like, just like dry, sometimes funny, sometimes menacing. She's so great. And she really does well as Poison Ivy.
I agree with that sentiment. Is that all the things we like? That might be all the things we like.
I have one more thing.
Okay.
This is a thing that does at some point kind of go off the rails. As I sat down not knowing what to expect from this movie, I really appreciate how it is unapologetically part of a wider DC universe. Jason Woodrue is not explained at all, except by the phrase, dimensionally displaced dryad. Sarge Steele shows up. Never an explanation for Sarge Steele.
It's like he's been there the whole time.
It's like he's been there the whole time. Batman's got a relationship with him, and apparently whatever shadowy government organization he's part of, it doesn't matter. Oh, it's Argus. They say Argus. People, you don't care. If you watch The Flash or Arrow, you know. And if you don't know, it doesn't matter. He's just as though we've always been here. We never explain him. We don't explain Argus. We don't explain Woodrue. We don't explain anything. And I think, I mean, I have the benefit of prior comic book knowledge, but you don't as much for some of these deeper pulls, Caleb. And I don't think you need any of this.
I didn't need it.
You get what the point is.
I was like, who's this guy? Okay. And then just like any other bad guy, I'd be like, oh yeah, plant guy who's working with Poison Ivy. Okay, I got it.
But I like that it's just, we just suggest. So for me watching it, I kind of grab the Easter eggs. But I can imagine someone who does not recognize the Easter eggs, it just feels like a more expansive universe. It's like, I'm curious about that, but I don't need it for this story.
And that leads me to a tidbit that I want to add, which is this is technically, and there was some conversation online. Is this in the DC animated universe? Is it not? It's Bruce Timm. It's got the same style, same voice actors. And initially it was not clear, but eventually Warner Brothers did on their website list this as a part of the DC animated universe.
So that's worth explaining just a little bit for those of you who may not realize. We have mentioned before on an animated discussion that there is a DC animated universe. And what we have meant, I'm not sure we've ever explained it.
I don't know if we have. That's a good point.
What we mean specifically are the shows that encompass Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series, Justice League Unlimited, Static Shock,
Batman
the Zeta
Beyond.
Project,
Yeah.
the Zeta Project, and Batman Beyond. Now, there's also one film release for that. Or, I'm sorry.
2.
There are 2 film releases for that. One we've discussed so far,
Mask of the Phantasm.
and also eventually probably we'll get to Return of the Joker. There's a lot of it, you guys.
Well, and there's also those are the I think theatrical, but also you have there's a bunch of other ones because you also have Sub-Zero is a movie in there.
Oh yes, I'm sorry, theatrical, but there was a something like Flight of the Batwoman and yes, Sub-Zero. There are a few.
I think there's like
direct-to-video.
4 direct-to-video in the DCAU, and now 5.
And also a bunch of 2- and 3-parters from individual series that got packaged.
Oh,
as
right.
wider
World's
releases.
Finest.
So just if
Yeah.
you go look, there are those things. But that's it. It begins with Batman the Animated Series and real world chronologically ends with Justice League Unlimited.
Yeah, so it started 1992, Batman the Animated Series, concluded in 2006 with Justice League Unlimited. And everything we just mentioned, all those other shows we mentioned, came somewhere in between. Like, not chronologically in that universe.
Chronologically, it's all over the map.
Yeah, because after Batman the Animated Series and Superman, we got Batman Beyond, which takes place after
the future, the ephemeral future. Anyway, so it's worth noting for, I guess, the old schoolish fans that this is part of that universe. So that's what we mean when we say DC Animated Universe or DCAU.
Yeah, and not to be confused with the DC Expanded Universe, which is the cinematic universe.
Right.
So just want to make sure we clarify
or
this.
The Arrowverse or any of these other one-shot release animated films.
I can't wait until one day someone just goes so crazy that they have like a Infinite Crisis where they somehow make all these fit in the same thing, and they just go in there and try to throw this all together to make it coherent. It'd be crazy. But if it could happen in any comic book universe, DC could do it.
My guess is DC Rebirth has the framework, but that is a whole other podcast.
Oh boy.
Okay.
So things we didn't like.
That's the good news.
Okay, good news. Bad news is this movie is called Batman and Harley Quinn, and sorry, Melissa Ranch from Big Bang Theory, she ain't no Harley Quinn. First and foremost, there's a lot of problematic. This movie is very problematic. We'll elaborate that in a second. But I don't need every actress to sound like Tara Strong or Arlene Sorkin. But when I hear,
but yes, I do.
Kind of, it's distracting.
In this case, I do. Yeah,
it's distracting because I didn't feel like she added anything. It felt like it feels like someone trying to do a Harley Quinn impression, not someone doing their own take on Harley Quinn.
Yeah.
And that's the difference.
And not a great impression. Like, I don't want to bag on this actress. I mean, I don't like The Big Bang Theory. If you do, God bless you. Enjoy your shows. But I don't. But not because of her.
Oh no,
she's fine. Of what I know of her is fine, but she just does not deliver a Harley Quinn that is on the level of Tara Strong, who doesn't deliver a Harley Quinn that is on the level of Arlene Sorkin. Now, this is also not to denigrate Tara Strong, who does a million awesome voices.
Oh, yes.
But Arlene Sorkin, we've talked before, she nailed it right out of the gate. Right away.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I mean, even if you look at one of the 2 things I liked about Suicide Squad was Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. And the reason I liked it was because I didn't feel like she was doing an impression. I felt like she was definitely lifting heavily from the source material and the versions that existed before, but like it felt like her own take on it.
Yes.
And this is an example of what I would say happens to the Joker quite a bit, actually, is people were trying to do their Joker impression based on Mark Hamill, but really, to get a great Joker performance, you get Heath Ledger, who just does something so wildly different. Yeah. And that was definitely, first and foremost, before we get into any other stuff, that was something I was pretty disappointed.
She's a headliner.
Yeah.
And as Harley, and it doesn't quite come together right from jump, which kind of suggests the tonal shifts we get all through the story. Also, this thing has no idea what it wants to be.
Not a clue.
In fact, I'll swing back to a positive thing that I didn't mention because it kind of makes more sense here. I like the idea of an action comedy Batman show.
Oh yeah.
I watched and loved Batman the Brave and the Bold. I am here for action comedy Batman I'm here for action comedy Batman in Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah, I mean,
they've done it.
Yes, and they have done. And also, you really like 66 Batman, and you like the animated version of the 66.
Less
Batman.
action, more comedy.
More
but
comedy,
yeah,
but
I'm saying you can marry these things, and you can do it on this character.
Yes,
it has been done.
Right.
It is not done here.
No,
Mostly because it doesn't know what it's doing.
It doesn't commit to anything.
Yes.
And, that's the thing. So it begins like a workman episode of Batman the Animated Series. Like, oh, hey, Poison Ivy, they're working to steal and kidnap this guy. It's, so you're like, okay, it's got the visual style of BTAS.
Yep.
It's doing the BTAS opening thing.
It's also pretty serious.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, these security guards are in a lot of danger.
Yeah.
Woodrue was saying, we need to go before the police get here, or worse. Like, they're taking the stakes very seriously.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we get we don't have a title card, but we get an opening sequence, which is wildly not like that thing we just watched.
Weird. It's like the opening credits to Down with Love or to the original Bewitched.
The Incredibles was one that came to mind.
Also the Incredibles. And I mean, I'll shout out to my wife right here that she declared the opening credits the best part of this movie.
It's
so
pretty
that
cool.
should tell you something. But it is incongruous with the intro that we have, and also with the scenes we get immediately after with Batman and Nightwing starting the investigation. They're just still really serious.
And they come back and it's really serious. Yeah. But then it gets okay. So it starts to get goofy when Harley shows up.
Which makes sense.
Yes.
Except the ways that it gets goofy.
Well, okay. And normally I outline this show. What I ended up doing was instead of doing, and I did do a normal outline, but I actually created a separate category where I'm like, weird stuff in this movie. And one of the first things I put down here is Nightwing discovers Harley Quinn at Super Babes.
Which is basically like superhero Hooters.
Exactly. Like superhero Hooters.
Okay. And thus
the millennials didn't kill this one yet, apparently.
Thus begins the section we call Where Things Got Skeevy.
Skeevy, yes.
Yeah, so this came out last year, and it's since this has come out that we have started having articles about how millennials are killing Hooters. And as terrible as almost all of those articles are, this one actually made me laugh because good riddance to Hooters. We will not mourn you.
I'll mourn the loss of the wings, but not literally anything else.
There are literally better wings.
I know.
Everywhere else. I have been at gas stations with better wings than Hooters. Needless to say.
That's another podcast, Joshua. That's my wing podcast. You want to join? Okay. Yeah, so no. Good riddance, Hooters. Millennials are killing. It's like we took myself being a millennial. We have killed Apple. We're killing out Applebee's. Olive Garden's next, and Hooters is on the way out. Man, it's going down. I think it's hilarious though because another thing outside of the Hooters things I want to lay out there too, and this will be something we'll touch on with some of the air quotes jokes in this movie. This movie came out in August of 2017. That is about 2 months before Harvey Weinstein takes before the Harvey Weinstein story comes out, which leads to the Me Too and Time's Up movement. I know it's not that long ago, but in the last year, we have had and are continuing to have a very nuanced conversation in our culture at large about how we look at sexual harassment, how we talk about LGBTQ+. That's a thing that's been happening. We're reflecting on that.
What do women, people of color, and people of differing gender identities and sexualities look like in our fiction?
Right.
How are they treated behind the camera and above the line?
Right.
We're having that conversation, and frankly, it's not going very well. It's kind of a hot mess right now. We're in the thick of it. I hope it winds up in a good place.
I'm optimistically, I think it'll end up in a good place because the fact that we're having the conversation is a huge step forward.
Big first step, talking about the problem. But it is very interesting to watch this film come out just a few months before, and probably written several months before.
Yes, and I say Harvey Weinstein because as it relates to the comedy, unfortunately, as you're all aware, there was also a lot of other people who got called on their shit. One of them being Louis C.K. So there are and so this leads to the comedy bit. This movie has a lot of really bad off-color jokes. A lot of it's sexually charged in really weird, skeevy ways, as you put. And we can hit on a couple of those. But that's in the context of the comedy scene, this has been like a thing. Like, oh my God. Yeah. This happened. Even looking at stuff like what happened with James Gunn. I know this is all heavy stuff, and it's not that I want to get there. I just think that the way that comedy was never good anyway. but it was more acceptable.
Whether it should have been or not, it was.
Yes, it was.
And now this thing,
It just plays so bad. It's bad.
just like it's not
bad.
It's not funny, even if you want to forgive the problematic parts.
No, it's weird.
And on top of that, the problematic parts just loom even larger. And I mean, introducing the entire concept of a super Hooters.
God, it's so nasty. It's so gross.
It's just gross.
And
It's
other thing I
gross.
want to point out too, like it's ultra male gazy. Now, as a person, I will say the male gaze can actually be usually is not used effectively or used well or used correctly, but there are ways to use that to make some artistic decisions. This is not one of them. But there's so many butt shots in this thing. I mean, so many. I'm like, what is
lingering,
I'm
loving?
like, what is going on? Oh man.
The question really becomes: this is part of the tonal shift. Is who is this for? Again, we'll get to the scene that made her say this, but my wife was sitting there going, I'm very uncomfortable watching this, right? So it's not for her, okay? Caleb and I are too mature, honestly, for these jokes.
So it's all
not for us.
It's all like super juvenile, like stuff that you might, and I'm even saying might isn't, I don't know if I would have, but maybe like in a weird context, I might have laughed at in middle school, maybe.
Yeah. And a lot of it's very objectifying.
Oh, yeah.
Which is not a thing that I feel like we should still be teaching middle school. It's not funny, and it's gross. Like, it's just gross.
It's gross.
And how much of it there is, and it's all the way through this thing.
All throughout the movie. It starts with Super Hooters, and that's just the beginning, because, I mean, gosh. We get...
Yeah, so let's talk about the worst of it.
Okay.
So it begins with Super Hooters, and there is lots more than this, but let's talk about the nadir of this film's sexual politics.
Yes. Okay.
Nightwing and Harley have an excellent fight.
Yes.
Harley
cool fight.
manages to win.
Yeah.
Nightwing wakes up,
yes.
tied to the bed, and here our troubles begin. We don't even need to do beat by beat.
No.
Either you're going to watch this thing or you're not. Let's tell you what the conversation Caleb and I are having, because this will tell you everything that's wrong with this scene.
Right.
This is a rape scene. This is a scene that at least suggests that Harley is raping Nightwing.
So this is where Joshua and I are splitting hairs. Either way, I just want to reiterate, it's not okay in any kind.
Good.
It's not good. It's
scene.
not a good scene in any way you put it. I find that at least the way they wrote it and executed it is it's rapey until it's not. Which again, to your point, that's what I'm saying. I'm not denying
1% rapey is too rapey.
Exactly. No, totally. He is tied up to. He is tied up to the bed. Harley Quinn is pressuring him. She makes a joke implying that Batman might be gay and he needs to prove otherwise. Weird. I'm like, I don't even know where that came from. Okay, that's weird. And then all of a sudden, when the lights go off, everything changes. Which, by the way, here's the weird thing about it is I actually thought the art style when it turned to the blues was really cool. But but it's really uncomfortable.
In the middle of making interesting visual choices, I can't notice them because I'm too skeeved out by what is going on screen.
Well, okay, and this is also after we've had a close-up of her butt. Again, like there's so many close-ups of her butt.
She has disrobed. She has undressed in front of Nightwing.
Yeah.
She has gone to her closet and spent at least 40 seconds talking to him while bent over.
Right.
He
is like tied in a very like awkward sexual like spread eagle position.
And she gets interested in him when she notices his off-screen erection.
Man, it's just so gross because she's like, the boy wonder all grown up, and then like a light bulb goes off, and then you're like, oh wait,
I don't like where this is going.
Yeah. There
is a point where Nightwing seems to be involving himself in consensual activity.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I think you and I were kind of butting heads there's a scene where he basically is like, okay, well, he's like, oh, the things I do for Gotham. But he doesn't say it like in a rolling his eyes, like relinquish way. It's like a very like, if I'm going to do this, I'm kind of into it, you know?
It sounds like a Penthouse letter. Like it's terrible.
No, it's not good.
And the reason that's not enough, for me, the reason that's not enough for me is that everything up until then has been him very uncomfortable.
Right.
It has been him. I mean, let's remember this is Harley Quinn. She is a lunatic murderer that recently, within the last 20 minutes, dosed him with Joker venom. So he's been roofied. He wakes up tied up. And then she starts coming on to him, and his responses are things like, I'm not saying it wouldn't be nice, but because it would be nice. And it reads to me, the moment that I really started to read this as 100% rapey, no questions, is when I thought about how this thing would play if their genders were reversed. And you would have a woman who was trying to talk her way out of a terrifying situation where her body is in jeopardy.
Right, and a guy's coercing her into,
I don't see any difference just because of the gender swap. And to your point, because there is a moment where he makes this like sly, the things I do for Gotham. And I think, again, this is the real place where Caleb and I disagree, is this one line. For me, if we gender swapped this scene and had a man writing it just like we do now, we would rightfully read that line as the writer trying to make all of this horror show retroactively okay.
Right.
And we wouldn't buy it.
Sure.
That is my supposition. We would not buy it.
Sure. And that's where we disagree. I don't think you're wrong about the gender swap thing. That is a cultural expectation. The way the scene reads to me, which either way, again, skeevy, gross, but I just say, when I would say, is this a rape scene? I'm like, I don't know if I go that far. Because at the end of it, it's kind of like, it's more like she pressures him, and he finally just gives in and decides, if I'm going to give in, I'm just going to have fun with it, which is still kind of like not great. But I'm just saying, I hesitate to say it's a rape scene, but you raise a great point. The fact that we have to ask the question and you say, if it's 1% rapey, it's probably not okay. And you're right, because outside of that, like the way that the whole scene is executed, other than the cool color effect that I really liked, other than that, like the whole execution here, I just felt gross. I felt really gross.
For what it's worth, this is the moment that my wife, who's watching this with me, says, I don't feel comfortable watching this scene, right? And I mean, again, that's what made me think of the gender swap, because I knew what she was doing. The tonal shifts on this thing are so all over the place that they treat everything else like such a joke after this and a little bit before this.
And it does muddy that scene even more, because it's, again, you don't know how to like read it.
How am I supposed to read this? And so I've decided for myself, 1% rapey is too rapey. It's a rape scene.
Sure.
And
I want to articulate, I am no way I'm endorsing.
Right. Don't hear more than this is. Caleb is not an endorsing of this scene. It's terrible.
It's more like, how bad is it, is more the question. There's different degrees of bad, and I think I'm maybe just 1 degree less than you, but also agreeing that it's not good and it's bad.
And in this scene, you even have a flip side of some of the things that I liked. Like, I like how immediately part of a larger universe it is. But in this scene, Harley makes reference to a book that exists in the real world, the book that suggested that Batman and Robin were living a homosexual lifestyle, and that was bad. She references that in this scene to kind of wrong foot and blackmail Nightwing into proving his manhood. And I'm like, who's this joke for? Because, and this is no shade on my esteemed co-host, he's just not as deep into superhero history as myself.
It's a real deep dive.
I had to explain the power, the reason that Seduction of the Innocent holds this place in comic book history, and that it's tied to the House Un-American Activities Committee and other really big movements in American history. Who was this air quotes joke for? Because it's not funny.
I know who this movie is for. This movie is for Bruce Timm, but
which I feel is a problem.
It is a problem, and we'll get to that kind of towards the conclusion, because outside of the weird sexual dynamics, so we've hit that one home. We've already mentioned the juvenile humor. There's in this movie, and this is where it was like consecutive scenes back to back, because you have that scene, and then not too long later, you have a fart joke that runs on for like a minute and a half. I was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
An actual fart joke. I was like, this, I mean, you're
we
low-hanging
have had
fruit.
Super Hooters. Yeah. We have had a possible rape scene. We have had a legitimately funny slapstick Harley jumps out of the Batmobile for the wrong reasons scene. And then we have, like a couple of minutes of fart joke. So, friends, possibly a rape scene and a minute and a half fart joke in the same movie.
We're not even halfway there.
Maybe don't watch it.
Yeah. We're not even halfway through the movie yet, just by the way. I do think it gets a little better toward the end. I mean, rebound's not the right word, but I enjoyed things in the end, I guess.
Well, it stops trying to be funny.
Yeah.
And it also stops being sexually skeevy.
Yes.
So by that measure, it does get better. But I would not say that it's
know what? One thing that we also disagree on is Ivy and Harley romantic tension. I picked up on I felt that the whole way through. Pretty hard.
I don't think they commit.
Pretty clear. I mean, the way that Harley talks about her, and then the way that when she looks Ivy in the eyes, you see it, and then when Ivy has it, like, leaves her in the burning building, there's like a deep rooted distrust, and then the whole thing at the end with the tears.
No, they do describe them repeatedly,
and they have a very warm embrace, and not like and I read it as definitely like, oh, this is not a friend embrace. This is definitely like a full on, very intimate.
I think you brought that with you. And here's why I say that. Let's say you show up for this and you don't really know anything about Batman the Animated Series. You have seen Harley have a heterosexual relationship on screen, right? We've seen that.
Right.
So there's nothing to suggest that she's bisexual in this film. They consistently refer to them as friends, sometimes best friends. Harley refers to Ivy as BFF. That's it. If I changed my relationship status,
well, I'm not okay
to my wife,
so it's well, they're not together anymore though. They're just like ex-partners in crime who I don't know, the implication is that it was very intimate.
My feeling is in terms of the rest of the show that is so juvenile, it upsets me that they could not commit to the point of just laying out the fact that they had a romantic relationship, because that is not textual.
It's basic. It's so close to being textual. It's all in the visuals. It's all
not textual.
It is though. It's like all in the visual storytelling. Like
it's not there.
Okay, listen. I'd have to test this, but I guarantee I could go find someone who probably doesn't care, and I could say at the end, so what would the relationship status there would be? I guarantee you, specifically in 2018, someone's going to say, I got some gay vibes off of that. I guarantee you, someone would say that.
Right, but the difference is the last one we talked about where there were gay vibes.
Well, no, that
was 1993.
Right.
We should not be just doing vibes in 2018, especially with two characters who have an established sexual and romantic
I think
past.
It was fine. There was no reason for them to get into that in this movie, but the movie was already kind of a cluster anyway, so...
It's just all of the other sexual nonsense that goes into this, and we can't textually commit to a lesbian relationship. I just again, I don't understand who this movie's for other than Bruce Timm. And let's talk about how that's kind of a problem. Because if I had realized that this was Bruce Timm, I would have shown up a lot faster.
Right.
I would have been equally just as disappointed as I turned out being. But this led to some research where we realized we're not sure if he has a screenplay credit.
Or how many he has.
Right. He's got a lot of story credits.
Yeah. Which is, by the way, a distinction for listeners out there. Their story and screenplay are not the same thing. We kind of mentioned at the top. Story is like the high-level, big picture stuff. Like, okay, we're going to break this episode down. This episode's going to be about Mr. Freeze, the origin story. Like, high level. Probably breaks down some, like, outlines the episode, probably.
Beats, character moments, maybe.
The screenplay is the dialogue. The screenplay is what makes the scenes work scene to scene. So there's a difference there.
It sets the tone. Honestly, it makes sure that the tone is consistent. It makes sure that the dialogue is good, which, side note, big shocker. When it's good, it's okay in this movie, and when it's not, it's terrible. I am now calling into question how much Bruce Timm impacted positively the like moment-to-moment storytelling decisions of the various and sundry DCAU shows.
Well, I'll say this: the story credits aren't nothing.
They aren't nothing.
They're pretty important, and I think he does probably back a lot of ideas that we like.
Absolutely, yes, I agree with that.
Because again, we've talked about the Harley and Ivy thing, and I know Paul Dini was a strong collaborator on those particular projects. But I mean, it's something that he seems like he's behind, and that's where. And this is where you and I disagree. I feel like it's pretty like pro that in this movie, but like there's
pro enough to say it.
We can agree to disagree. I don't feel like there are some things I don't feel like need to be said. That it's visual anyway. That's
in the movie where Nightwing needs to make sure that we all know Batman has made out with supervillains. We should probably also make sure that the romantic tension between Harley and Ivy is textual. I am prepared to say
I think
that
it's textual.
The tonal shifts are it can't be. Nobody said it out loud.
Okay. Is it in the script? No. Is it in the animation? Is it in the drawings?
I really don't think so.
I think it is.
And what there is undermined by the rest of the script.
Oh, sure. And again, the tonal stuff is the problem.
I'm not sure that I'm going to race to see a Bruce Timm penned DC product after this.
No. Okay. I want to draw a distinction here. If Bruce Timm's name on it as a producer or even a story guy, I'm cool with it. But specifically with the screenplay level thing, yes.
I don't think he can be trusted at that level of granularity.
I definitely have some reservations I didn't have before. I'll put it that way.
Which is, if those of you have been listening to animated discussion for a while, we've like spoken with reverence for Bruce Timm, and it is undermined somewhat.
Yes. No, I'd agree, because we have to really rethink how we feel about that guy and at large.
Yeah,
you
to
know?
be honest, I really am now forced to rethink who did what that I really liked on the old stuff. Because I agree with you. There's a bunch of story, like high-level story and plot choices that I believed Tim was involved in and had a...
Well, I mean, a lot of stuff we
hand
like.
on.
We know he did Mr. Freeze, for
Right,
example. There's a lot of stuff he did. I don't want to take away from that. I don't think all of a sudden everything with his name on it's worthless, because that's not the case.
Let's just say that the dynamics in my head in the writer's room are like my theoretical writer's room for BTAS have shifted around a little bit.
Yeah, maybe. We
and-
weren't there, so it's hard to say. But certainly
Absolutely.
you have to think about it a little differently. Yeah.
And like I said, if he wrote it, I'm not coming for it.
When his name's on something, I don't feel like as anything but a writer. And
Yes.
due to our
Literally
research,
any other job.
any other job, we're like, okay, cool. Yeah, it's probably pretty good. Also, fun fact: Bruce Timm had a cameo in here. Did you catch that?
Yes, I did.
The voice of Booster Gold.
Yes.
Which again, weird. Okay, I actually thought it was pretty funny how they were doing the sign language thing. I actually thought that was kind of funny. Again, weird thing I thought was funny in this movie. But what was dumb was they did the old school, like, crinkle the paper next to me. I was like, what the heck's going on all of a sudden? This is canon, Joshua.
No, headcanon is more powerful. And it's not in.
So, Joshua, I think we're about to wrap up. But going back to the fact that this is canon, another thing, and I know the animated series is all about resetting the status quo all the time. Did you stick around for the post credits thing that was like 2 minutes long? The
Yes.
Dr. Quinzel asked Dr. Quinn.
Yes.
What?
Okay.
What?
You know what? I was going to let this go since we were disagreeing so much about the sexual politics, or at least that specific scene.
Sure. What even was that? And if it's canon, what happened?
This is a minutes long joke about mental illness.
That's what it feels like.
That's what it is. It is a minutes long joke.
They make fun of the guy
that
who's
makes
there.
fun of mental illness and the ability or inability to seek treatment for it. It is.
I'm not
terrible.
I'm
It's terrible.
not disagreeing with you on that, because I just was
No.
like flabbergasted. I'm like, what even is this thing?
I mean, forget
yeah,
the
'cause you're right.
framing device. Forget any of it.
No, because they put the mentally ill guy, the guy who's seeking treatment, on a TV show where Harley punishes him and makes him go through this whole. Yeah, I don't even know. So it sounds like both of us absolutely hate this thing and are gonna headcanon this thing to hell and pretend it didn't exist because it's kind of offensive, and it's offensive and it doesn't make any sense. Like it doesn't make any sense in any context at all. I don't like. It's not doesn't make sense for the world building. Doesn't really make sense for the character. It's not funny. It's putting a guy who's seeking help on TV where he gets actually punished.
Yes.
Whoa.
Okay, so don't watch this. Instead, watch what, Caleb? What would you suggest?
Well, you know what stuck out to me about this movie, Joshua? And it's just the world we live in 2018, is how I actually empathize a little more with Poison Ivy than I thought I would have.
Yes.
Like, oh yeah, humans
Yes.
keep screwing stuff up, so let's just make it all trees. Make it all trees. And I'm getting to the point where I'm like, you know what? That's not a bad idea.
Right.
So what I'm going to do is I was thinking of other movies that are very pro-environment. Maybe not quite as extreme as Poison Ivy, but
Well, who should be? Nobody.
Right, nobody, because she's a little. I wouldn't go that far. But we have from Studio Ghibli. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are familiar. Princess Mononoke. It's a great film that I think has a much more nuanced exploration about humans, how humans utilize the environment, and why we're screwing it up. But also not necessarily like always maliciously screwing it up. It just kind of happens. And then of course we have WALL-E from Pixar, another very big popular film, a really underrated Pixar film. I mean, I know people like it, but it's like one of those. I'm like, no, that's like top 3. Like people should talk about it more because it's a really cool movie
And
about
a
the
message
environment.
we should talk about more.
No, and it's still like I'm still sitting here. I'm like, this is the future, guys.
Yeah, pay
We're
attention.
still on trajectory for WALL-E future. And lastly, deep dive way back, classic Soylent Green. Just go all the way back.
Sure. I'm here for it. I'm cool with that.
Joshua, what do you got?
So the existence of this movie so offends me that I'm going to stay within the Batman milieu, and I'm going to suggest 3 different episodes of Batman the Animated Series that do different parts of this movie 1,000% better.
I like the way you think.
One of them we've already covered, Harley and Ivy. If you want to see Harley and Ivy together,
Being pretty gay,
and also with the excuse of it being 25 years ago for the gayness being subtextual,
right?
Harley and Ivy. If you want to see Batman team up with Harley to bring in another villain, in this case the Joker, Harlequinade, we will talk about it. Just you wait until you have access to this show again. We're going to get to Harlequinade. And if you want to see what Harley going straight and it going horribly awry would actually look like, we will also eventually discuss in greater detail Harley's Holiday, where a simple misunderstanding turns into a crazy giant car chase that lasts for about 15 of 22 minutes.
It's a lot of fun.
It's great. All three of those do different parts of this movie in ways that make this movie even more shameful than it already is.
Again, okay, I just want to bring it back. I want to bring it back because those are great recommendations. And it makes me beg the question. I just can't get over this. If you're coming out of retirement after 11 years to tell a story, I just feel like at that point, that means you have a story.
Trademark characters.
Yes.
I mean, he's a co-creator of Harley Quinn.
Yes.
These are your signature characters here.
You're going to do that. I would assume that you have a story that you're really passionate about telling. And whenever you get this, I wonder, what are you passionate about? Like, what is the point of this thing? Because as you've said, it wasn't even like really a super new story because we've seen aspects of it in other episodes. There's nothing new here. There's nothing new at all, and I think it only stands to hurt what we think about the existing DC animated universe.
Well, that about wraps up this animated discussion. Caleb, where can people go to continue the conversation with you?
Well, Joshua, you can always find me on Twitter talking about film, television, video games, and all sorts of other pop culture goodness at C Masters Talk. That's letter C Masters Talk. I'm also the editor-in-chief and film critic at the Cinematropolis, and we publish these in-depth essays on all types of different films, oftentimes including science fiction and superhero films, all the stuff you'd want to read about. And you can find all of these articles at thecinematropolis.com. Joshua, what about you?
I'm also most active on Twitter, where you can find me easily enough at Joshua Unruh. And remember that an animated discussion is a Pulp Diction Productions program and is 100% supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can keep this and our other shows in production, check out patreon.com/pulpdictionproductions.
All right, make sure to join us when we return to our regularly scheduled programming with Season 2, Episode 20 of Batman the Animated Series, What is Reality?
Until next time, we'll see you back here. Same bat time, same bat channel.